The Louisville football program has received a handful of commitments over the past couple days. We will discuss what all has happened in the past week on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Let's get right on into the show.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinals Sports Zone. I also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to personally thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. On this bonus episode of the show, we're going to talk about the various commitments that the Louisville football program has received over the past couple days, starting out with the big four-star cornerback prospect out of California, Aaron Williams. We will discuss what he brings to the table to the Flyville 23 class. We will also discuss the two additions from the transfer portal into the Louisville secondary. That is Florida State's Jarvis Brownlee Jr. and Middle Tennessee State's Quincy Riley. In the final segment, we will discuss what the depth chart now could possibly look like for the Louisville secondary next year, and who are some of the players that could be seeing some early playing time. So we'll start out talking about the lone high school recruit that committed over the past week, the other two being transfers. That is four-star California cornerback Aaron Williams, who is ranked currently as the 127th best prospect in the 2023 class, according to 24/7 Sports Composite. If you are big into following rankings and stuff like that, he is ranked as the 7th highest-rated prospect that the Louisville Cardinals have ever had committed to their program. Also, another top 10 member in that respective list, Pierce Clarkson, is the 9th highest rated commit for the Louisville football program. So that just kind of sheds light on how big of a class this could potentially turn out to be. And I don't think it's really far-fetched any longer to say that this has the makings of possibly the highest rated recruiting class in Louisville football history. Now, it's still early, only 9 commits, 3 of those being from California. All 3 of those are 4 stars. Aaron Williams is the highest rated commit in the class so far. He had offers from, well, quite possibly almost all of the big-time schools. You're talking about Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, LSU, Miami, Michigan, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Oregon, Tennessee, UCLA, USC, Utah. I mean, the list goes on and on. He definitely racked up a ton of offers, and that Alabama offer came in late January, and which was preceded a week before by Miami. So it's not like he was offered early on and teams kind of backed off. I mean, he is a high profile caliber prospect. I mean, he is a possible one of the best cornerbacks in the class. He is currently rated as the 14th best, the 8th best prospect in California, regardless of position, number 1 cornerback in California. But overall, the 6'2", 185-pound cornerback out of Corona, California, has the makings of a true number 1 lockdown corner. Kind of reading into what some people have said, I've had some people that are, I wouldn't necessarily say recruiting experts by any stretch, but they have a good a pulse of West Coast recruiting and some of the standouts from that area. When I asked a friend of mine what they thought of Aaron Williams' game, their first instinct or their first response, I guess, was that it was shades of Jair Alexander. I asked him to go into a little bit more depth. What do you mean by that? Because, I mean, Jair Alexander has a lot of great qualities. What stands out to you most about Williams' game that relates to what you see from Jair? Well, he said, well, you see he's got a little bit more size. Jair is a little under 6 foot, with Aaron Williams being 6'2". but their pursuit, their ability to, press the opposing receiver at the line of scrimmage and guard the opposing wide receiver, within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. He was a big fan of his footwork. When I watched film on Aaron Williams, I was impressed with the footwork as well. I love the intensity that he plays with a ton of speed, plays with a ton of energy, and has that almost like I'm trying to think of like a James Sample. You can think of, if you're familiar with the team from a couple years ago. James Sample was extremely good in coverage because whenever the ball was thrown, he was a heat-seeking missile looking to break up the pass, and a good amount of times he did just that. Aaron Williams gives me those same vibes. So I see all of the qualities of a potential number one cornerback. That's something that Louisville has been, over the past couple of years, has been grateful to have with Jair Alexander. That turned into Kei'Trel Clark. So you have a little bit more size, which obviously helps a ton when you're a cornerback. But just having that quickness in terms of footwork, the ability to read the opposing quarterback, and just doing a great job of in coverage, has great hands, great instincts, some very top tier qualities in what you're looking for a successful cornerback. Greg Biggins, who is a West Coast guru for 24/7 Sports, is very high on Aaron Williams. But overall, this is a huge start to the Cardinal recruiting class. This is only going to continue the momentum. Hopefully this opens the door completely for the hashtag Cali to the Ville recruiting trend to continue, because yes, it would be hard to hold on to a prospect's commitment in hopes of a player not flipping and going to another school. It would be harder to keep a commitment if it was just one player from across the country that's coming to your program. But now that you've got three from the same state, very highly rated guys, one of them being Pierce Clarkson, you have three highly rated guys that are friends, and you're recruiting some of their other friends. I feel like it would probably be, I guess you could say, the odds are in your favor to hold the commitments and not lose those players to flips. If their buddies are going to a school, I'm just kind of thinking, not even from a football sense, just kind of from a life sense. If your buddies are going somewhere, you're likely not going to change your mind if your friends are going, rather than if it was just you. So obviously it's kind of speculation, but that's a key thing that I've been kind of thinking of all day since Aaron Williams committed. But it is a huge commitment, and it's another huge recruiting booster. As of right now, the Cardinals have the 5th ranked recruiting class in the 2023 cycle. Now, obviously, it's very early. There are 9 commits in the class, so you still have a ways to go. I would probably say that it's unlikely that the Cardinals finish with a top 5 or even a top 10 recruiting class. The goal should be top 25. I think they achieve that right now by average recruit ranking. They are set to have the best class in school history. Top 25 is the goal. It would not surprise me if they got into the top 20, if they can land some highly rated guys like DeAndre Moore Jr., possibly Madden Sanker, the offensive lineman out of Georgia. There's some other guys in this class that they are having visit and stuff like that. They've got 4-star defensive players on campus this weekend. So the recruiting, arguably, you could say, has never been better here at the University of Louisville, at least not since recruiting databases begun probably in the early 2000s. So we will continue to monitor Flyville 23. Hopefully we get some more commitments soon. It's obviously the momentum has carried with, now you get a very high profile cornerback out of the state of California. So that pipeline seems to be building. But I want to take this time now to focus more on the immediate help for next season. That is transfers Jarvis Brownlee Jr. out of Florida State and Quincy Riley out of Middle Tennessee State. We will talk about what both of those players bring to the table respectively after we talk about our friends over at Built Bar. Look, I feel like I keep saying this. You're probably tired of hearing me say it, but I give up on my resolutions pretty quickly every year. Before we get into February, they're gone, poof, gone, vanished. This year, though, I've been going strong thanks to Built Bar because really I don't even kind of feel like I'm partaking in a resolution because it feels like a candy bar, but it's a lot healthier. They're covered in 100% real chocolate, but they are leaps and bounds more healthy. You can go to built.com and scroll down to check out the macros chart. They're low calorie, high in protein. Most contain about 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. From mint brownie, coconut almond, and now white chocolate cookies and cream. They are all delicious. New flavors are coming out all the time. If they think a flavor might be good, look, they'll make it happen. It will be delicious and it will be good for you. At Built Bar, they are about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, and then they figure out how to make it healthy. I don't know how they do it, but they simply pull it off every single time. So do yourself a favor. Go to Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Once again, that's using the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Now, if you've been listening throughout the week, a big announcement starting Thursday, April 28th. Tune in to Locked On NFL Draft's live coverage of the 2022 NFL Draft with all 3 days of real-time analysis from our extensive lineup of experts and insiders. And for those of you dying to know who your team will take, catch Odyssey and Locked On's NFL Mock Draft Special hosted by Brian Peacock and former scout Matt Williamson of the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show all week leading up to the first pick. As we talked about Aaron Williams for the Flyville 23 class, I now want to talk about some more secondary additions that Scott Satterfield and company have added to the program. But now we're kind of focusing more on the immediate help guys. We had 2 transfer commitments seemingly in 48 hours. It was first started by Florida State transfer Jarvis Brownlee Jr. And then on Thursday, it was kind of late Wednesday, maybe like early in the morning on Thursday, Middle Tennessee State transfer Quincy Riley committed to the Cardinals, which seemingly has bolstered the secondary for next season. We'll talk more about that in the next segment. But we'll start out talking about Jarvis Brownlee Jr. Excuse me. When I watch his game, I get kind of the same vibes that I get from a player like from like an Aaron Williams in the sense that they play with so much passion. And, once the ball is thrown, they are swarming the pass catcher trying to break it up. This past season, he had 51 total tackles, which I believe was like maybe top 3 on the team. Had 2 interceptions, which was I think also like top 3 on the team or so. Had a touchdown as well, pick 6 against I think it was Massachusetts. The 2 years before that, had 1 tackle in 2019, had 26 tackles in 2020. So really started playing a lot more this past year. I think he started 11 out of the 12 games for the Seminoles in 2021. Now, I was reading on social media, and social media represents only a small portion of every fan base. And social media, what they say is not always gospel. Opposing fans, when a player leaves, the quick reaction is to, okay, it seems like not a lot of nice things are said about any player that leaves, but you have a good amount of the fan base that does wish them the best of luck. So I'm not saying that the Florida State fan base is a bad fan base by any means. I will say that a good amount of the Florida State fan base was not necessarily opposed to Brownlee leaving because it seemed, I guess he was the player that was involved in that, I think Jacksonville State, the Hail Mary play in which Florida State got beat in the last second. And it seemed like there was an ordeal with a possible NIL deal that fell through or something like that. I'm not sure the specifics, so I'm not going to speculate. But it seemed like Florida State fans weren't necessarily opposed to him leaving. But when I watch his film, I think that this is definitely a depth move for Satterfield and company. We're going to see how much he plays right away. I would probably expect him to contend with guys like, Trey Franklin, Jaden Williams, or Jay. I think it's Jay Williams. Is it Jay or Jaden? I keep forgetting. It is Jaden Williams. They added, I think we got a commitment at some point whose name was Jay. Could be. I could be completely wrong. To be completely honest with you, I'm actually looking at that right now, so I apologize for the kind of the loop in talking. But okay, Jaden Davis. I think Jaden Williams might go by Jay Williams. I could be wrong, and I apologize if I am. It seems like there's a lot of Jadens that have been committing recently over the past couple months or so. But regardless, I do look at Jarvis Brownlee as a depth move for the Cardinals, basically replenishing the secondary that not only was, not big on numbers to begin with, but really with the transfers of Greedy Vance and Kei'Trel Walker, numbers were extremely slim. So Scott Satterfield and company, overhauled the recruiting of transfer defensive backs, and Brownlee is likely being brought in to fulfill that depth position and being a solid rotational piece. The other transfer is Middle Tennessee State cornerback Quincy Riley, who was second in the country last year at 5 interceptions. If you go back and look at the stats, he only played, I think, 9 games or so. So he actually led the nation in interceptions per game. He had 33 total tackles, all Conference USA selection. Had, I think it was 9 pass deflections this past year. I forgot to mention Brownlee seemingly has 2 years of college eligibility left. Quincy Riley is the same way. Riley, since entering the transfer portal, was a highly sought-after cornerback. Tennessee brought him in for the spring game. You had places like Mississippi, North Carolina, Mississippi State, NC State, Kansas, Old Dominion, so on and so forth. A good amount of schools reached out to Riley. Riley is a player that likely will come in and compete for the starting position opposite of Trey Franklin and Chandler Jones. The 6-foot cornerback really kind of reminds me of a lot of like Kei'Trel Clark in the way that they are just so good in terms of reading the opposing quarterback's eyes, jumping passing routes, being in the right place at the right time, positioning themselves to contend for jump balls against bigger receivers, and having a good amount of athleticism to be able to help with the 50-50 balls, and has good hands as well. So I look for Quincy Riley to be in immediate contention for starting opposite of Kei'Trel Clark. This has a potential to be a Kei'Trel Clark-esque move for the Cardinals, to where you get a commitment from a non-Power 5 school or a transfer from a non-Power 5 school, and they end up being a diamond in the rough type guy that projects to be an NFL draft pick. I think which that epitomizes what Kei'Trel Clark is, and we will now see Quincy Riley hopefully seeing that same trajectory. I do think that Kei'Trel Clark will be an NFL draft pick next spring, and hopefully Quincy Riley will follow in his footsteps. So I don't want to keep going on this subject because it's a great transition into the next one. I want to talk about what the Louisville secondary can look like, not just cornerbacks but also safeties, just the whole secondary in general, who could be playing early, what that depth chart could look like. We will talk about that here in just a second. After we talk about our friends over at BetOnline, BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. As I mentioned, there was no secret that the biggest need for the Cardinals in the offseason was the secondary. Not only did you kind of have, a lack of depth throughout the season. I think there were 5 scholarship cornerbacks or 5 scholarship defense. I think it was cornerbacks in the bowl game against Air Force. But, you end up losing Quinterio Cole to the draft. Ben Perry is kind of in, a hybrid between linebacker and safety. Promising freshman Kei'Trel Walker and Greedy Vance decide to transfer to Oklahoma and Florida State respectively. So, that leaves a lot of holes in the defense. Thankfully, Kei'Trel Clark announced he was coming back. Chandler Jones did the same. You had Kendrick Duncan Jr., who made a surprising move and came back, with a lot of people expecting him to go to the NFL draft. But ultimately, Scott Satterfield and company hit the overhaul button in the transfer portal, and they got a plethora of transfers, 3 safeties and 3 cornerbacks, and they also got I think it's 3 safeties in the 2022 class: Jeremiah Caldwell, D'Angelo Hutchinson, and Antonio Watts. Transfer-wise, we mentioned Quincy Riley and Jarvis Brownlee Jr. The other cornerback was Jaden Williams from Southern California. I was going to say South Carolina. USC. They also got safety transfers in Nicario Harper, Jalen Alexander from Duke. You also have MJ Griffin from Temple. When you talk about the depth chart and who could be the early day starters, I think for safety, obviously it's about who's that second starter outside of Kendrick Duncan Jr. I think MJ Griffin could slide into that Quinterio Cole role, to where he's kind of a hard-hitting safety that is very solid in the run game. Quinterio Cole was top, I think, 3 or 4 in tackles for the Cardinals this past season. MJ Griffin possesses a lot of that violent hit capabilities, and just that that great pursuit when it comes to chasing down the opposing ball carrier. So I think that MJ Griffin is primed for some early snaps. Josh Minkins is another name to watch out for, a returning safety that battled injury throughout the past year but had some good moments later on in the season. He's a player that I could see playing some big-time snaps. You also have some players that transferred in and stuff like that. But overall, I think that that's where you're going to see the starters come from. I think it could either be MJ, could either be Josh Minkins, and you have Ben Perry as another guy that could slide into that safety hybrid role. But you have Jalen Alexander, you have Nicario Harper. I think both of those guys are going to contend for depth roles as well. In terms of the incoming guys, Jeremiah Caldwell is extremely impressive. I think he's an athlete that is going to be used as sort of a cornerback and a safety, and that's kind of the MO for the Louisville defense under Brian Brown, is they like versatility in the defensive backfield. So guys that can play cornerback, guys that can play safety. We saw that with Chandler Jones this past year. Went from cornerback, played a little bit of safety. Will we be seeing that more this year? Who knows? If Trey Franklin and Quincy Riley, or if they take the next steps forward and show that they could be formidable options opposite of Kei'Trel Clark, maybe they do slide Chandler Jones into that role. But overall, I think that you're going to see a lot of veterans or veteran presence in the depth chart at safety. I think that D'Angelo Hutchinson and Antonio Watts could be possible redshirt candidates, and Jeremiah Caldwell could be the newcomer in the 2022 class that makes some noise and causes some position battles. So there's a handful of guys in the Louisville safety room that I'm fond of, but they let me look up. I'm sorry, that probably sounds horrible with my hoodie brushing up against this microphone. I don't know why I didn't have this pulled up. I should have had that pulled up. I wanted to look at who the returning safeties were, because it seems like outside of Quinterio Cole, there was not a lot of depth in the safety room to begin with. You have MJ, you have Shavarick Williams, the JUCO transfer that was a late addition this past season, so on and so forth. So overall, I think that that's where you're going to see the most production at safety is going to be from the veteran leadership. Cornerback-wise, like the safety position, you have your number one starter. You have Kei'Trel Clark back, assuming that he can be healthy coming into the season. That's going to be the big question is how healthy is he going to be for the first game of the season. Hopefully he is back to full strength. Trey Franklin really busted onto the scene at the end of last season, really kind of starting from conference play, and made some big-time plays, had some big interceptions. I could see him being the starter. You have Chandler Jones also in the mix, who's a veteran guy who's played a ton of snaps for Louisville. And then you have Quincy Riley, the Middle Tennessee State transfer that looks to get some big-time snaps as well. True sophomores, Derek Edwards and Rance Connor. I think they're true sophomores. If they're not, they're redshirt freshmen. But, redshirt freshmen, sophomores, whatever you want to call them. Second-year guys, Derek Edwards and Rance Connor have made some solid strides in spring ball, made some plays in the spring game. It'll be interesting to see what we see from them production-wise this year and how they contend with guys like Jalen Alexander. With Jalen Alexander is actually, could also be contending for safety depth as well. He's a safety as well. Jaden Williams, I should say. Jaden Williams, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. This is probably the big position battle that I'm looking at. Obviously, the number 2 corner, we'll see in terms of how that goes. But also, who's going to be the guy in the slot? Are they going to look, to fill the slot with, Ben Perry, with, some coverage linebackers? I know that they, utilize linebackers in the safety slot or the nickel, so to speak, in that package in the slot. We'll see if Brian Brown and Wesley McGriff turn to a defensive back to fill that role. But overall, with the 4-3 base, I think you're pretty solid with the two cornerbacks. So, Jaden Williams, Jarvis Brownlee Jr., Rance Connor, Derek Edwards. I think all 4 of those guys are really going to be competing for meaningful snaps, and I'm very interested to see how that battle goes in fall camp. So I think you're going to see a lot of veteran presence to start the season, whether or not some of the younger guys or even some of the transfers are able to poke into the depth chart later on the season is yet to be seen. But definitely replenishing the secondary, Scott Satterfield has, along with the rest of the coaching staff. So, but that's going to wrap up this Friday edition of the show. Thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. There's a couple bonus episodes that are going to be out. One with NBA writer for Forbes.com, Shane Young, talking about Donovan Mitchell's path in the playoffs coming up. Also talking about Tyler Harrell entering the transfer portal, Kamari Lands from the basketball program, confirming that he will be a Louisville Cardinal, and also some list cuts for some basketball portal targets. Some great content in the week. But I do want to let you know about an opportunity that you're probably aware of right now. Make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. But as I mentioned, that's going to wrap up this Friday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day, and we will see you right back here on Monday.